but his wife wanted to keep roots in the East because she's from the Southeast. Okay. Finally, I wanted to give everybody a little moment to vent about politics if you have anything good or bad to say. Wait. My intention here is to encourage your political thinking and political participation, not to actually share my own.
Slaves in Colorado.
And Washington. What else?
Everyone just started liking Boulder a little bit more.
Yeah, University of Boulder.
Our school's higher rate of sending kids to Boulder is going to go even higher. It's so minority so high.
If that's possible, yes. They take days off when the snow is good. Checkmate, right? Can you imagine? It's okay, everybody, we're going to cancel school today. Surf in. Alright. So that's what we're going to talk about, really? Pot in Colorado is the only political thought.
And Washington.
What? A and B, schools are going to survive. 37 didn't pass.
I know. Well, it was kind of poorly written. It was like Swiss cheese.
I gotta remind you of something. The whole Swiss cheese and flaws in the writing, that is always an argument against every ever, because nothing is perfect coming out of the first round of legislative writing. I gotta say, with all the holes that it had, it was guaranteed to pass. Early polling was 80-20.
How did it not pass?
Anybody find the ratio yet for big? Somebody please quote this number so I'm not spreading political lies. So depending on who you ask, the yes on 37 was outspent by out-of-state money, ballpark of 40-1. Because labeling genetically engineered foods is, the public doesn't want to eat it. If you just go across the board, petition random everybody, just hey, you don't know anything? Do you want genetically modified food? Do it. Heck no. The public doesn't want it. It just, a very small percentage of the public is willing to eat that. So they know that if you know when you're eating it, you're not going to buy it, and they're going to go out of business. And so they spent a lot of money to push more people into the flawed hole in the legislation camp. And I'm not saying that it was a perfect bill. I kind of think that our initiative process sort of wastes a lot of time on poorly crafted legislation. But it produces a lot of interesting ideas. And this is one that our public wanted until we were convinced not to want it. That was a very interesting thing. I'm only talking this much because it's relevant to the current unit. You can see it on the board.
It was 53%.
The loss? Yeah, it was 55 to 44, and then newer numbers came in.
The only interesting that I think is interesting that came out of this was the worker.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It was a referendum, and they essentially voted that they wanted to have a state. And it's going to be centered Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico will be a state?
Essentially.
Wow.
We need to combine North and South Dakota, but they don't have it. Right. And then bring in Puerto Rico. I actually like that idea. It'd be that sounds good. Let's go.
We should just take a line out. It's like
What did you vote on 1219?
I voted yes. Purely on the economics. I mean, yeah, I mean, again, that initiative process, right? But, okay.
What was Prop 19?
It was California's pot legalization for recreational use. I just think it's a waste of money. I think the drug war is just too expensive. I mean, maybe it could, but I'm not sure that I want to invest in winning this battle.
It just feeds money into the prison. That's where it belongs.
And the Mexican mob. Please don't kill me. Alright. Okay, here we go. Okay, alright. Yep, up. Okay. Hey, everybody. Hi. Hello. Okay. Thank you. Yesterday we left off with study number 25. And as much as I'd like to hear your opinions on recreational marijuana use, I think we need to get back to number 25. We were here. I had to add one thing that I didn't get to tell you yesterday. And I'm sorry that I didn't mention this more clearly. You remember the comparison, patchy, not patchy, small, cool fires that recover quickly, big, hot, dangerous, deadly fires that recover very slowly. One piece that some of you may already know, I just hadn't put on the board, is that a little fire surrounded by vegetation has very little erosion. Even if you erode the whole patch, that dirt will usually get stuck in all these plants downhill. If you can wrap vegetation around your burn site, that lowers the impact of erosion. The trouble we have is that in our larger burn areas, there is no vegetation around to anchor any of that ash and soil, and so the erosion is a huge problem that I did not include in my explanation yesterday as we know of. For example, if anybody here lives in Goleta or knows people in Goleta, you may have seen that immediately after the Gap fire, our county spent more money after the fire preparing for erosion than they did during the fire in fighting it. The costliest thing about the Gap fire was not the fire. It was the cost of handling all that sediment and ash load. Okay, yeah.
So I know yesterday you said that we spent a lot of money doing the wrong thing for fires.
Yes.
So what should we have done, like at the beginning?
Well, probably the same thing that we should do once we get back to patching. Nobody would argue with protecting human life and protecting property. I think it's out of the question to let the fires burn into your town. But what we should have done is leave nature to natural processes that include natural fires. We should have fought those fires that were started by humans to whatever degree we could when they were small, right? So limit the spread of those man-made fires. But if fire started naturally and it's in the wilderness, that's a natural fire. You should let it burn. In the past, when we already had patchiness in our fire renewal communities, most of those fires would have been contained by the patches around them. And if you see that fire starting to creep into somebody's backyard, then at that point you should have firefighters lined up. Coincidentally, people should not be living nestled in firewood in fire renewal communities. So the whole Painted Cave community and the community that I have property in on West Camino Cielo, those homeowners, myself included, are responsible to have a defensible space around their house, to make a patch with a house in the middle. We should have focused on homeowner preparation strategies, defensible space. We should have focused on protecting life and property, and we should not have wasted money very quickly if you don't mind. One of the things that I got to get out right away, I'm looking at the words in 26. You should have a list of vocab, I think. In that list, clear cutting. Anytime you see clear cut, I want you to think immediate erosion. The words clear cut, whenever you see that, go straight to erosion. So, small clear cuts with erosion control, okay, I get it, sure. Clear cuts on flat land, I understand, it's the only profitable way to log in a large scale. Human labor is expensive. Insurance is costly. We don't want our trained professionals dying under falling trees in awkward positions. I hate to say it, but clear cutting is kind of the only logically profitable way to log. So I would say small clear cuts with erosion protection, okay. But giant horizon to horizon clear cuts on hill country with rivers at the bottom, oh my God. There is no better exchange of little hours to tons of erosion than clear cutting. You cannot make more erosion than clear cutting on slopes. If your target was to translate human hours into erosion volume, the best you could possibly do is clear cut. Something else I got to say in number 26, and I hate to politicize this issue. It's not a Democrat-Republican thing. It's an environmentalist versus logger thing. Plantations are by far the better choice for lumber harvesting if the alternative is cutting down the last of the forest. I'm sure you realize out of 100% that we started in the U.S., we're down to about 7 old-growth forests. And of that 7, about 4 is already cleared for logging. Your generation will come out of this with maybe 2 to 3% of the old growth America started with. We cannot afford any more wilderness logging. It's just out. It's out of the question. 2 to 3% left. There has to be a plan B. So yeah, tree farms, okay, better than logging in the forest. We all agree. It's down to 2 or 3% protected. We can't give that up. But you need to be very skeptical listeners. As you leave my class and leave high school and become grown-ups buying and spending and making economic decisions, be very skeptical when you hear people say that a plantation is somehow better than a forest. Because ecologically, a plantation is about one step above a parking lot. A tree farm is a monoculture, just like a corn monoculture. Ecologically, that's not diversity of habitats, that's a habitat for a small number of species, period. Ecologically, plantations are practically irrelevant. A lot of tree farmers say, hey, we're making a tree farm that's good for the environment because we soak up carbon faster